Hello, everyone. Let me take you back. It was 1979, and I was living in Northern Virginia. I thought I was really cool, very, very progressive. I worked in a nightclub, had my first apartment, and drove a terrible Chevy Vega. It was mine, and it was paid off. It was a great time in my life. I had just started to live, to become an adult. I can say now that I am older that I was a pretty girl. Back then, I had aspirations of becoming a model and had lots of boyfriends. I was just living life. Then, one day, I decided to go horseback riding. I went to Centerville, Virginia, where I used to take riding lessons, and rented a horse for a couple of hours. I rode, and it was a beautiful April day. I remember wearing my jeans and a light blue Indian cotton shirt and feeling the breeze. It was really great. I'm a good rider, not a great rider, and I was a bit out of shape. I hadn't ridden in a few months. I encountered two other guys who were riding behind me. We decided to race our horses. My horse took off and went from a canter to a fast gallop. Then the terrain got rough. It became very bumpy, and I knew I was losing control. I remember feeling this dread. Oh God, that horrible and growing fear passed through me when my horse stumbled, and I knew I was going to fly off. Luckily, I was wearing my helmet, and as I was thrown off the horse at high speed, I never touched the ground. I entered this velvet, limitless tunnel. The walls were soft, and it was completely dark. What happened was that I was thrown from the horse, face first into the rocks in a ditch, and I died. I didn't know it because I had left my body, but when I left my body and went to another dimension, it was so abrupt. I knew something had happened. I was no longer in physical reality, and that was the biggest shock of my life. Until then, all the emotions you can imagine just swirled within me. Fear, isolation, dread, shock, sadness for having lost everything that was most precious to me, my identity. Then, I went through this tunnel, and I know that other people talk about it, seeing the light and feeling this joy. It wasn't like that for me. I think it's because it was an accident, and it was so abrupt. And then, everything happened. There's no time. Time is irrelevant on the other side, or in the non-physical reality. You are simply there, in the present. When you leave the physical world, there are so many things you learn, so many experiences, that there is no human language articulate enough to describe them. To say that the walls of the tunnel were velvet-like, but dark and dense at the same time. To say that I felt no pain. I felt no physical pain. Although I had the sensation of a body, I didn't have the courage to check my limbs to see if they were still there. I felt magnificent. To say the least, I felt so wonderful. I wasn't in pain. The problems of physical reality didn't exist. I was just in the present, and it's hard to articulate, but I was just there. My grandfather died when I was 12 years old. It was very traumatic. He had a terrible death from cancer. I loved him so much. He was the most precious person in the world to me, and he was my guide. He didn't look like a young man. He looked like an older man, the man I knew from my childhood. The person was there to comfort me, and it was truly a reason, to say the least, to see the person you love and lost, and whom you hadn't seen in years. Knowing that he still existed, knowing the love he felt on the day he died, was so strong. Years later, when he found me, there are things I learned in my life review that came next, which were very disturbing, at least for me. You go through your life review basically, and it's like this. It's not a judgment. You are your own critic. You re-experience the times you hurt or were rude to someone. You will feel their feelings of pain, or you will feel their joy when you did something good. So, everything you do in your life, from the time you are a small child until the day you take your last breath, it matters how you treat people. You get the bill at the end. Basically, if you've been a very bad person, I think your life review would be quite hellish. It would be pretty terrible. Everything in your life, your mindset, you're a kind person, or you are someone who just takes out their bad mood on everyone. So my life review was sad, stressful, disturbing, painful, and I felt, wow, I haven't even finished my life. I never had the chance to do it right, So there was real anguish in my life review. But I saw some things that I really did well, like a girl I became friends with who was being bullied at school. I realized how important that was. I saw how significant it was to find that lost cat for the little girl I returned it to. Small things like that aren't really small. They're huge. They're gigantic. The values I had are so different. All my change happened during my life review. The worst thing you can do is ruin someone's destiny, hurt an innocent person, negatively affect their life. That's the worst thing you can do. It's so important to be kind and listen. I'm not Santa Laura, but I try not to take a bad day out on another person. I try to do better. So I had this life review, and it was a lot of distress, very unsettling. My grandfather was there to comfort me, and the non-physical reality is so responsive to thought that you can hardly believe it. I thought about the tree of life. It simply crossed my mind, and I saw this beautiful tree. I knew it wasn't the tree of life, like a biblical thing, but it was amazing. It was white and textured, and it was just great. So you really have to control what you're thinking. While you're out of the body, you have the physical reality. But in the same space, in a different dimension, the non-physical reality exists. Layers, teeth, and there's like a superhighway you go down and pass through the layers that become less dense and more responsive to thought. But when I had my life review, I was still very hopeful about the physical reality. So I was very anchored in the physical reality, and I wasn't accepting it well. My grandfather was trying to calm me down, trying to make me feel better. He was there to help me. I know I had a choice about returning to the physical reality, coming back to my life. And I know there was a blonde woman who said it would be tough. This was good. I was going to have an especially difficult life, a challenging life in the non-physical reality. Time doesn't exist. The life review happens instantaneously, but it has many layers. There's a layer just outside of the physical reality that is like a carbon copy, but just a bit less dense. So, let's say you die in your home. You can go to the non-physical reality and still think you're in your home. You could get lost there. Maybe that's what happens when people think there are ghosts and such. I don't know, just a guess. I know I traveled on a superhighway, like a superhighway that goes through dimensions and layers. The farthest I went, blind out of body, was to the source. I think people confuse that with heaven. I don't believe it is heaven. I think there's something much beyond that. But I entered this area that was full of souls, floating in a sea of love. There was a sky, and there was sunshine, but no real sun. There was brightness, and music floated like random waves of sound, beautiful classical music, soothing to make me feel better. The sea of souls I was floating in were parts of me. I had never really been someone very connected to reincarnation until then, but I was with different personalities that were part of me. So that's hard to understand. I couldn't stay long, just enough for a glimpse through a door or a window, and a feeling of intense joy and love. I think people confuse that with heaven, but it wasn't heaven. It was coming home. It was returning to your source. Then after that, I was catapulted back to another dimension. My grandfather was there. It was a dimension close to physical reality. It appeared very clear in the area. He had form. He was there. He looked like himself. No one said, "Oh, Laura, you have to go back and live your life." It was time for me to return. So I had no choice. I wanted to stay with him. An overwhelming fear ran through me at the thought of going back, after I learned all these things. And then I felt like while I was there, things were being taken away. Lessons, explanations, experiences. I told my grandfather, "This has been so long." So I knew there was much I can't tell you. A lot that happened that was being removed from my memories. I think there was a lot more explanation, a lot more interaction I had, but I wasn't allowed to take the memories with me. When I returned to physical reality, I felt them being ripped from me. And that made me sad grieving, as if I wanted to, grab them back and push them back, and they were being taken from me. Maybe because it was too much for me to comprehend, I don't know. That's just a guess. But all these epiphanies, And there were many epiphanies and many interactions. This experience was much longer than I can tell you. I can only share what I managed to preserve and remember. I know my grandfather felt empathy for me, but he didn't want me there. He wanted me to come back and finish my life. But I also think he wanted me to come back and tell his wife that I loved my grandmother what had happened. I felt like a messenger for him. It was heartbreaking. There simply wouldn't be enough tears in an ocean to express how terrible I felt about coming back. My body was pulled back. It went back through the tunnel. And boom, I returned to physical reality. They brought me back, and there was a whole group of people there. There was a car to take me to the hospital and all that. I looked at these guys, looked around the field, and I was injured. I was really hurt at the same time. I just told myself, this isn't reality. I knew where I had been, and that is the true home. We are just visitors here, taking the tour of physical reality. But I knew I had lost something terribly important. I had gone through something that changed my life, and I was troubled. I was also very hurt on the way to the hospital. I fainted. I didn't leave my body, but I fainted. I had a massive concussion, a broken nose that is still broken, a broken finger that is still crooked. I think there wasn't a part of me that wasn't injured. I was very banged up. I was wearing a riding helmet. I think that saved my life. I entered the hospital, and my mother actually worked in that hospital, Fairfax Hospital. This was in April of 1979. I walked into the hospital and they did x-rays, all sorts of tests and things. I started trying to tell the doctor what had happened, about my near-death experience and those things. Suddenly, he went from compassion to disgust. He crossed his arms and said, "What drugs have you taken?" I replied, "No drugs. I had an accident." "This is what happened during the accident. I don't understand, why I'm here." He said some things to my mother, and my mother said, "Look, if she were on drugs, she would be the first to tell you. She's not. She's had a serious head injury. You need to enter it." The doctor was horrible, and I just wanted to go home. There were some things I felt were urgent. That urgency after your near-death experience is just profound. Everything was urgent for me. For about 12 hours, I had to tell my grandmother that I loved her. I had to tell my boyfriend that I loved him. But what changed in me after that doctor embarrassed me in front of the nurses? He humiliated me and just said horrible things, terrible things. When my mom was taking me home after the accident, I tried to open the car door and get out in the middle of traffic. I was really disturbed. Then I went to my mom's house, went up the stairs, and I was really hurt. I struggled with how I could tell someone. And I thought, I can't tell anyone this. It has to be my secret. No one will understand. I wouldn't believe anyone if they told me. It was really very, very disturbing. I felt like I had lost my grandfather again, like it was a second death. And then I worried about the blonde-haired woman who told me I was going to have a very hard life and that it was going to be quite difficult. Well, she really, really told the truth because shortly after that, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease and had many life or death struggles. But the things I learned about the non-physical reality are that love still exists. All the good matters. There is a beautiful place you go to and can experience after death. So my fear of death decreased. I was really very sad about many things. I told my grandma about, seeing my grandfather and those things. And she said, "My mother had the gift. I think it came through you." I don't have it. Then I found out that my great-grandmother had psychic abilities, healing abilities. People would come to her who were sick, and she would place her hand on them. And she did that when her own son had a bee sting that was fatal, and she saved him. It's so beautiful to know that love still extends to the next life. It's so beautiful to know that I will see my loved ones again, that I will be reunited. It was the greatest gift they have ever given me. I would have liked to skip the broken nose and the injuries, but I'm very glad I had that fall. I'm really grateful that someone brought me back, because I was able to offer comfort and insight from the beyond to my dying parents before they passed away. I was there with them as they were dying, taking care of them. I don't think I could have done that otherwise. A near-death experience opens you up psychically. It changes you completely. I believe that the greatest gift of my life was this accident, the greatest tragedy. It's really, really strange to miss my grandfather. I've missed him for these 40 years. I'm glad I'll see him again, but wow, I really have missed him. I think people romanticize a near-death experience. It's not an easy thing. Like you come to Jesus and there are angels. It's a real responsibility tied to the life you've lived. So if you haven't lived such an ideal life, try to be kinder. Try not to harm anyone. That's what I believe. A near-death experience is such a big change. It is an experience, but it doesn't give you permission to just give up and let go because you're going to a good place. Your purpose here in this physical reality, in this incarnation, is to live the best life you can, help people in the best way you can. Be a good person. Love. All those little cheesy things your mother told you when you were a kid about kindness. They're all true, but we are brought here to this earth to learn, love, and try to be a better person. I don't always succeed at that, but that's what I took away from my near-death experience.